I got some real interesting responses to our questionnaire about what you want to study. And there's some here in case you have a second thought. I was going to bring them to you tonight, but they didn't get in my hand to get in the car. But there were things like the book of Revelation, which Kathy's going to teach in a few weeks into February.
Oh, awesome.
There was Moses as a character. There was Amos and Joel as books. There was also several people that wanted to study about the Apocrypha. Anybody not know what the Apocrypha is? That's the books that were not put into the official Bible. And there's some really interesting, there's some great stories in there too. There's one of the books, Ecclesiasticus, C-U-S, that is a lot like Proverbs. I really like that one. What else was in there? Bible study on patience and on accountability. So I've looked into lots of those. And we're going to start on one tonight. And I don't know if we'll get it finished or not, but we're going to look at the book of Esther. You know, Esther is one of those stories we all know. Who knows that you come into the kingdom for such a time as this. But we're going to be talking about some of the background and what happened. And once I do a little bit of introduction, I'm going to give you an open book answer sheet. So that as we read the scripture, you can fill in the blanks. It's just interesting that Esther was the last book admitted to the Jewish Bible. Does anybody know why that might have been the last book? Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Ezekiel, before that?
Because it was a woman.
So there's what?
A
A
woman.
woman? Well, Ruth made it in. It's because the word G-O-D is not in the book anywhere. And it took a little bit of understanding that God shows up whether we call it God or not. So that was what I thought that was always interesting about that. If you know very much of your Old Testament history, you know that they finally got to the Promised Land, and as always, they continued to mess up one way or the other. And finally, they get carried off to Babylon. Daniel, we talked about that a little bit last week. And then a king came along. In Greek, his name is Xerxes. His name in Hebrew is, I always forget that, I don't pronounce it, Ahasuerus. And he thought that they had done good in that country, which they were told to, and so he let some of them go back to the homeland. But a lot of them had acclimated and assimilated to the Babylonian culture, and they wanted to stay there. And that's where we find Ruth, having stayed with the other people, went back. Esther is a Jewish orphan. And when I was thinking about this, I worked on it through the week, and then I thought, what a wonderful day to talk about a time when the Jewish population was almost destroyed, right after yesterday being the anniversary of the prison camp at Auschwitz being freed. Jewish tradition says that Mordecai wrote it. I have to tell you this. Jerry and Harvey asked this guy to read scripture one time. And it was the book of Esther. And when he came to the name Mordecai, he called it Mortiki. And she just kind of let it go. I think he was a Spanish scholar. And when it was over, she said, where did you come up with Mortiki? He said, I don't know how to pronounce it. It looked like that to me. So don't ever feel bad if you just guess it a book. So they've been permitted to go back to the homeland. There's a lot of documentation about this king, and all this happened between 486 and 465 BC. And it's the only book in the Old Testament that they've not found a scrap of in the Dead Sea Scrolls. They've not found any record of it there. A lot of it's trying to show is that God has a plan, and God can work around all kinds of situations. There's a idea in it not to shrink from trials, which we'd all like to rather avoid. Also, the idea of pride, how pride can get us into trouble. There's a whole lot jammed in these 7 little chapters. Another person you'll be hearing about is Haman. Boy, Haman stepped into it up to his high parts. Yeah. And what we're going to do is read through this, and I have a sheet for you. You can fill in the answers if you want to. So we're going to look at Esther chapter 1, verses 1 through, sheet up here where I see it,
one too.
Actually, yeah, we're gonna read, 1 through 10, 1 through 8. Esther chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. And I really hope that some of you will answer questions and read the book sometime. And you're going to find out it's really pretty simple, what we're looking at. When asked to appear before, oh, that's a question, let's read it first. Esther chapter 1, verses 1 through 8. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes, the Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Kush. Now, if you were looking at a map, that would be from, you know where India is, that would be going all the way back over to Israel. At that time, King Xerxes reigned from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa. In the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials. The military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes and the nobles of the provinces were present. For a full 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and glory of his majesty. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people from the least to the greatest who were in the capital of Susa. The garden had hangings of white and blue linen fastened with cords of white linen and the purple material to silver rings and marble pillars. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of whatever that is, peripheral, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. Wine was served in goblets of gold, each came indifferent from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. By the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each person what they wanted. Wow, that sounds like a party, doesn't it? So the first question, we haven't gotten to her story yet. Let's look at the question says, and I got tired of typing out Azariah, so you just got A, King A. King A, known for his lengthy and long parties. How long was this party in this story, this passage? 108 days. Like 3 months plus.
Well, that's a party.
That's a party. And you heard about the liberality of it all. I get the picture. I can't even imagine the opulence describing these couches and these other things. And the wine, the king's wine. And everybody could have as much as they wanted to drink. Now, if you've ever been to a drinking party, that can get scary. When people are allowed to drink all they want to drink. Someone like to read verses 9 through 14, 9 through 13. Queen Vashti also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, and there's their names, to bring before him Queen Vashti, wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. Notice he doesn't describe her clothing. She was supposed to wear her crown, period. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. The king became furious and burned with anger. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in this matter of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king. And again, he lists their names. According to the law, what must be done to Queen Vashti, he asked. She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. So one of them replies, she's done wrong, but not only against the king, but against all the nobles and the people of the provinces. For the queen's conduct will become known to all the women, so they will despise their husbands and say, King Xerxes commanded Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the Persian and Median women of nobility who heard about the queen's conduct will respond to all the king's nobles in the same way. There'll be no end to the disrespect and discord. So, back to the first question. When asked to appear before King A's guest, Queen Vashti Did or did not refuse?
Did.
Did refuse, because, why did she not
She
want to go
didn't
up there?
think it was right for her to go naked.
Well, she had her crown.
Uh,
Yeah, but, and this was a problem. This was wrong because if the king asked you to do something, what were you supposed to do?
Do it.
Do it. Do it. Next line down. King A could not allow disobedience because why could he not tolerate this disobedience?
Because then the other women would do the same thing.
Yeah, if the queen can get away with it, we can too. Therefore, verse 19, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then when the king's edict is proclaimed throughout all this vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands, and from the least to the greatest. The king and nobles were pleased with his advice, so the king did as was proposed. He sent dispatches to all parts of the kingdom in his own script to be read to the people in their own language, proclaimed in each person's tongue that every man should be ruler of his household. Maybe it was Republican.
That's what's wrong today.
So he couldn't allow the disobedience because then all the women would get uppity, right? So what did he do? What did happen to Vashti?
He divorced her.
Well, yeah, she was banned to coming back in the presence of the king, and he was going to look for a new queen. What could have happened to her?
Could have killed her.
Could have killed her. Could have killed her. So there's a little bit of kindness wrapped up in that. Let's look at chapter 2. Read down on yourself for yourself verses 1 to 7. And we'll talk about this question. Okay, he begins his search for a new queen by
Every young virgin.
every beautiful young virgin to the palace.
And let the girl who best pleases the king.
He'll put them through the beauty treatments, and let the girl who is best pleases the king be made queen in place of Vashti. Beauty pageant. Can you imagine? That's the way he was going to pick his new queen. And this is where, in this passage, the next verse down, verse 8, we find out how Mordecai comes in. Verse 7 actually says at the end, and Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. So then as we continue to this, Esther was chosen, although it involved, when he says put them through the beauty treatments, there was a good chance that these contests involved some checking them out in other ways. Also, it's thought that that's how it was usually done, with the king sleeping with different virgins to see which one he wanted. Look over to chapter 3. Something comes up here, a little bit of a power play. A little bit of a power play. Verses 1 to 6. So far we've got Esther, the king, Vashti, and now we get Mordecai and Haman. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid homage concerning him to Haman, for the king had commanded that concerning him. But the Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate said, Mordecai, why do you disobey the king's command? Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. It's called peaceful disobedience. Therefore he told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all of Mordecai's people, the Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. So Mordecai refuses to kneel down or honor Haman. Refuses to kneel down to honor him because, why doesn't he kneel?
Because he was Jewish.
Yeah, remember the Daniel story last week? Jews were taught intensely that you honor God. You don't kneel to idols, you don't kneel to people. And now Mordecai, why do you think Mordecai is so upset just because this one man won't kneel before him? We don't hear about other people. Do you think, get the impression maybe he's gotten a little uppity? He's kind of enjoying his notoriety. For some reason, the king has elevated him higher than anyone else. And it wasn't even Mordecai that didn't see him kneeling, it was his workers, if you will. Verse 7 to 12. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, they cast the pur, which is the lot, in the presence of Haman to select a day and a month. A day and a month. And the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. When Haman said to Xerxes, there is a certain people dispersed and scattered among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, where customs are different from those of other people, and who do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them, and I will put 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasure for the men who will carry out this business. So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman. Keep the money, the king said to Haman,
Wow.
and do with the people as you please. Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in script for each province in the language of each people Haman's orders. They get sent out all over that all the Jews were to be killed on a particular day. Verse 15, spurred on by the king's command, the couriers were sent out and an edict issued to the citizens of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. Before we look at the other questions, this edict is going out that all the Jews are to be killed. But it says that Haman and the king were excited, but the rest of the city was bewildered. Why would that be? These Jewish people had been living among them for a long, long time. There were probably intermarriages. There were people they depended on for certain tasks, certain jobs. It's so much like Hitler in World War II in 1938-39. You know, there was no provable problem that the Jews had caused, but he wanted the pure Aryan race. The more I read this week, the more I thought, it sounds just like history preceding itself. So, Haman convinces the king that the Jews should be killed. And he sent out a decree that they should be killed. Which county, which state? He sent it out to the whole of their kingdom. And it tells you how large it was when he has to say different languages, different ways of writing. So it was going to be not just this little Susa town, city, but the whole thing. Let's look at chapter 4. Verses 1 to 6. This is really one of the sadder parts of the book, I think. When Mordecai learned what had been done, he ripped his clothes to shreds and put on sackcloth and ashes. Then he went out in the streets of the city, crying out and loud, and bitter cries. He came only as far as the king's gate, for no one dressed in sackcloth was allowed to enter the king's gate. As the king's order was posted in every province, there was loud lament among the Jews, fasting, weeping, wailing, and most of them stretched out on sackcloth and ashes. Esther's maids and eunuchs came and told her. The queen was stunned. She sent fresh clothes to Mordecai so he could take off his sackcloth, but he wouldn't accept them. Stop right there. When you look at this, you have all these Jews, and they've gotten the word that several months ahead they're going to be killed. The Jews, assuming God would not save them, what?
Mourned.
Mourned, moaned and groaned, cried. Don't you love this thing when it talks in the Old Testament about them renting their clothes? Doing that kind of thing. That's so intense. I always think of it when you see in the Middle East when there's a tragedy. Those people don't just weep and wipe their tears. They know how to really cry. They know how to really express that. And so they're doing that. And part of the reason I think that they didn't, quote unquote, trust God is think again about who they were and where they'd come from. The temple had been destroyed. The Jews had been carried off into captivity. Again, they had assimilated. They had become part of that community, that country. And when that happened, a lot of the tradition and the stories got lost. And again, it kind of reminds me of when we start telling MCC stories, even MCCBR stories from 20, 25 years ago. And you say, I never knew that. I never knew that. A lot of their trust in God had been dissipated because they just kind of fitted in. You know how it is when most of us have had a time when we were out of church. Yes? A period of time when you weren't involved in church. And then you go back and you go, what is this? What is this? I know they're going to have an offering, but what else are they doing? And you have to be reminded, not in church, but first time I did the prayer for the Board of Supervisors out in California. I got there, and I knew I was supposed to pray, and I got ready to walk off the stage. It says, and now we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. At that point, it probably been 10, 15 years since I'd said the pledge. So I'm standing there hoping I could remember the words, because when you're not around it, when you're not experiencing it. So they didn't really have a grasp on Jehovah, not the majority of them, but grasp to know that God was going to take care of them. Verse 7. So Esther calls for Houchins, one of the royal eunuchs whom the king had assigned to wait on her, and told him to go to Mordecai and get a full story of what was happening. Again, she's in the palace, so she's only hearing this noise and getting little bits and pieces about it. So he went to Mordecai in the town square in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him. He also told him the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to deposit to finance the massacre of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the bulletin that had been posted in Susa, ordering the massacre so he could show it to Esther. When he reported back with instructions to go to the king and intercede, plead with him for her people. Houchins came back and told Esther everything Mordecai had said. Esther talked it over with the eunuch and then sent him back to Mordecai this message. Everyone who works for the king here, and even the people out in the province, knows there's not a single fate for every man or woman who approaches the king without being invited. Death. The one exception is if the king extends his gold scepter, then he or she may live. And it's been 30 days now since I've been invited to come to the king. So who pleads with Esther for help? Mordecai. And she is what? Did she jump up and run to the king right then? No, she's frightened because she knows there's a law of the land that if you go before the king without being invited, you can be killed. That's a legitimate fear on her part, don't you think? I'm sure even though she'd only not been around him for 30 days, she'd probably seen this and heard of this happening. over and over and over. It's also interesting, where's Mordecai doing his mourning and grieving? At the king's gate. I imagine he could be heard, and if anybody came in and out of the palace, they had to go by him. Mordecai suggests to Esther that, verse 14, one of my favorite verses in the Bible. This is Mordecai. If you persist in staying silent at a time like this, help and deliverance will arrive for the Jews from somewhere else. But you and your family will be wiped out. Who knows? Maybe this is why you were made queen for just a time as this. He suggests to Esther that she go to the king, reminds her that she also would be killed. You know, that's hanging over her head. Now she's got not just the pressure of Mordecai, now she's got the whole Jewish community resting on her going to do this. Esther sent back her answer to Mordecai, go and get all the Jews living in Susa together. Fast for me, don't eat or drink for 3 days, either day or night, and I and my maids will fast with you. If you do this, I'll go to the king, even though it's forbidden. If I die, I die. Mordecai left and carried out Esther's instructions. So she decides to go to whom? The king. Don't you love it? If I die, I die. That's real commitment to your faith, real commitment to the situation. Because every logical thing said she would be killed. You know, there's so much in the Christian walk, Christian faith, that logically doesn't make any sense. But God can work great miracles around it. Chapter 5. 3 days later, Esther dressed in her royal robes and took up a position in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's throne room. The king was on his throne facing the entrance. When he noticed Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased to see her. The king extended the gold scepter in his hand. Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. The king asked, and what's your desire, Queen Esther? What do you want? Ask and it's yours, even if it's half my kingdom. If it please the king, let the king come with Haman to a dinner, and I'll prepare for him. Get Haman at once, said the king, so we can go to dinner with Esther. So the king and Haman joined Esther at the dinner she had arranged. As they were drinking the wine, the king said, now what is it you want? Half of my kingdom isn't too much to ask, just ask. Esther answers, here's what I want. If the king favors me and is pleased to do what I desire and ask, let the king and Haman come again tomorrow to the dinner that I'll fix with him. Then I'll give you a straight answer to the king's question. Is she dodging the question here? Is she dodging the answer? I think she is. So it's the king, and she invites the king and Haman. She's lacking in courage, so she puts off for tomorrow what she doesn't want to do today. I just can't even imagine this young woman knowing how the culture works, how the government works. She's standing there in front of the king and this hotshot Haman, or he's going to be coming. And he says, what do you want? I'll give you half my kingdom. She goes, yeah, come to dinner. Come to dinner. They finish dinner and he says again, what is it? What do you want? Do you hear how much he loved her that he was willing to give her half his kingdom? And she kind of chickens out again. I don't think it's any problem to see that she chickens out. I think that's a legitimate reaction. So Haman left the palace that day happy, beaming. When he saw Mordecai sitting at the king's gate, ignoring him, oblivious to him, Haman was furious. But he held himself in and went on home. He got his friends together with his wife Zeresh and started bragging about how much money he had, his many sons, all the times the king had honored him, and his promotion to the highest position in the government. On top of all that, Queen Esther invited me to a private dinner she gave for the king, just the three of us. And she's invited me to another one tomorrow, but I can't enjoy any of it when I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. his wife and all his friends said, build a gallows 75 feet high. First thing in the morning, speak with the king and get him to order Mordecai to be hanged. Then happily go with the king to dinner. Haman liked the sound of that. He had the gallows built. Haman plans to build. What are gallows? Hanging. 75 feet high. Talk about overdoing it. Even being proud of some horrible things getting built. I wonder how long the rope was. And so he's making this happen. Who's encouraging him in this?
His wife.
His wife and his friends. And part of that, I think, is because people like having friends in high places. And they realized how close to the king he was. So they didn't want anything upsetting Haman. Nothing. The story begins to turn just a little bit. Someone please read 6:1-5.
On that night the king could not sleep, and he gave orders to bring the book of records, the annals, and they were read to the king. It was found written how Mordecai had told about B&T, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold and who had conspired to assassinate the king. Then the king said, what honor or distinction has been bestowed on Mordecai for this? The king's servants who attended him said, nothing has been done for him. The king said, who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai hanged on the gallows that he had prepared. So the king's servants told him, Haman is there standing in the court. The king said, let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what shall be done for the man for whom the king wishes to honor? Haman said to himself, who would the king wish to honor more than me? So Haman said to the king, for the man whom the king wishes to honor, let royal robes be brought, which the king has worn, and a horse that the king has ridden with a royal crown on his head. Keep going.
That's good enough. So the king knows something's not right and he can't sleep. I'm sure we've all had nights like that. We know something's just not working right. And then he reads what? The records. Because they were big on keeping records of who'd done good and who'd messed up. Now, I don't know why he chose to read that. Maybe it was something he figured would put him to sleep quickly. But he reads that and realizing he had never honored Mordecai for saving his life. Nowhere in here have we heard Mordecai saying, hey, the king owes me one. The king owes me one. Tell him that. Mordecai didn't say that. So Haman comes into the king to discuss Mordecai being hanged, and the king wishes to discuss Mordecai being honored. Again, this is one of those where I love to see real live the interaction. Because you know enough about Haman now. You know, can you see him getting all puffed up? This is what is done for the man whom the king especially wants to honor. Go and do it, the king said to Haman. Don't waste another minute. Take the robe and the horse and do what you proposed to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Don't leave out a single detail of your plan. So Haman took the robe and horse. He reached Mordecai and led him through the city square, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man whom the king especially wants to honor. I can't even imagine. Can't even imagine. Haman is forced to lead Mordecai through the city, shouting what a great man he is. Talk about having to eat crow. Honoring him. Haman wants even more to kill Mordecai because it should have been him. It should have been him. He was so sure that when he talked about how great things were going to be. So the king and Haman went to dinner with Queen Esther. Chapter 7. At this second dinner, while they were drinking wine, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what would would you like? Half my kingdom? It's yours, just ask. Queen Esther answered, I have found favor in your eyes, O king, and if it pleases the king, give me my life and give my people their lives. I can kind of see the king going, we've been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, sold to be massacred, eliminated. If we had just been sold off to slavery, I wouldn't even have brought it up. Our troubles wouldn't have been worth bothering the king for. King Xerxes explodes. Who? Where is he? This is monstrous. An enemy, an adversary. This evil Haman, said Esther. Haman was terror-stricken before the king and queen. The king, raging, left his wine and stalked out into the palace garden. This time, taking a walk didn't help a whole lot. Haman stood there pleading with Queen Esther for his life. He could see that the king was finished with him, that he was doomed. As the king came back from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was groveling on the couch on which Esther reclined. The king roared out, will he even molest the queen while I'm just around the corner? When the word left the king's mouth, all the blood drained from Haman's face. Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, spoke up. Look over there. There's the gallows that Haman had built for Mordecai. They saved the king's life. It's right next to Haman's house, 75 feet high. The king says, hang him. Hang him on it. So Haman was hanged on the very gallows that he had built for Mordecai, and the king's hot anger cooled. So Esther tells the king she's also a Jew. Because of this, she will also be killed. She tells him who the villain is, and the king becomes angry toward Haman. After a walk, the king walks in on, this is a story they don't ever tell you in Sunday school. He walks in and Mordecai is groveling on the couch where the queen is reclining. Now, if you didn't know he was groveling and he was on the couch where the queen was reclining, what might the king have thought? That he was trying to rape her, that he was trying to molest her. I kind of feel sorry for Haman at that point, because I don't think there was anything on his mind. Haman is then sentenced to be hanged. Keep thinking about what goes around comes around. So verses 1 and 2 of chapter 8. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, arch enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king because Esther had explained the relationship. The king took off his signet ring, which had been taken back from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. Esther appointed Mordecai over Haman's estate. So he's given, what's a signet ring? We didn't talk about that when it first came through. What's a signet ring? Got it.
Is that a ring like that they put in the wax or something to show the king? I don't know.
Yeah, it had the king's crest on it. It had the king's crest on it, and any official document had to have that ring implanted. Now that tells you how much he had trusted Haman, because Haman could have decreed anything, just put that ring on and it was done. So he gives that to Mordecai. He gives Haman's estate to Esther. Now she's the queen, she doesn't need that estate. So instead she gives it to Mordecai. Gives it to Mordecai. The king is now very upset. He's very willing to help the Jews. And then he issues a decree. Secretaries were brought in again to write all these things out in all the different languages, from India to Ethiopia, 27 provinces. And he wrote under the name of King Xerxes and sealed the order, the royal signet ring. I guess he borrowed it back for a minute. Sent out the bulletins authorizing the Jews in every city to arm and defend themselves to the death, killing anyone who threatened them or their women and children, confiscating for themselves anything owned by their enemies. The king set this all King Xerxes, excuse me, sit down. The day was set in all King Xerxes' provinces was the 13th day of the 12th month of the month of Adar. The order was posted in all the public places. Couriers fired up by the king's order raced off to with the royal horses. Mordecai walked out of the king's presence wearing a royal robe of violet and white, a huge gold crown, and a purple cape of fine linen. The city of Susa exploded with joy. For Jews, it was all sunshine and laughter. They celebrated, they were honored. It was that day way over all the country. In every province, every city, when the king's bulletin was posted, the Jews took to the street in celebration. Not only that, but in many non-Jews rejoiced, because Jews, now it was not dangerous to be a Jew. So, why is he sending out another decree? He's already sent out one that all the Jews would be killed.
To make sure there wasn't.
He had to back up. Repeal what he had said. And he said that they can kill all their enemies, because I'm sure there were people who were so glad that they could kill those Jews. No matter what the king sent out next, they were going to do it. And he gives permission for the Jews to kill them all. And whenever they defeated somebody, they would get their weapons. A little bit of overkill in my opinion, but they didn't ask me.
You weren't around back then, were you?
And the 13th day of the 12th month, the king's orders came into effect. This was the day that the enemies of the Jews had planned to overpower them. But the tables were now turned. The Jews overpowered those who hated them. The Jews had gathered in the cities throughout the King Xerxes' province to lay hands on those seeking their ruin. Not one man was able to stand up against them. Fear made cowards of them all. What's more, the government officials, everyone who worked for the king, actually helped the Jews because of Mordecai. They were afraid of him. Mordecai by now was a power in the palace. As Mordecai became more and more powerful, his reputation had grown in all the provinces. How do you go from being a Jew about to be killed to suddenly being next to the king, the most powerful man in the kingdom? And I think it would be foolish if these people weren't scared of him, because I'm sure this was not the first time the Jews had been treated badly. So they're all helping, doing all they can to get back into the king and Mordecai's good graces. Actually, this is where they came up with the feast of Purim, P-U-R-I-M. Chapter 9, verse 5. So the Jews finished off all their enemies with the sword, slaughtering them right and left, and did as they pleased to those who hated them. In the palace complex of Susa, the Jews massacred 500 men. They also killed the 10 sons of Haman, he gives their names, but they took no plunder. That day when it was over, the number of those killed in the palace complex was given to the king. The king told Queen Esther, in the palace complex alone, the Jews killed 500 men, plus Haman's 10 sons. Think of the killing that must have been done in the rest of the provinces. What else do you want? Name it, it's yours. Your wish is my command. That's what I tell Joanne every time she asks me something. Your wish is my command. She'd kill me. It's kind of, in my mind, it's kind of a quick turnaround for the king who was so willing to listen to Haman. And now he's the Jew. I have to think that he probably wasn't as into that as Haman was. So she says, if it please the king, give the Jews of Susa permission to extend the term for the order another day, and have the bodies of Haman's 10 sons hanged in public display on the gallows. The king commanded it, the order was extended, the Jews went at it again. On the 14th day, they killed another 300 men in Susa, but again, they took no plunder. Why aren't they taking plunder? Why aren't they taking stuff that belonged to these men? Why aren't they taking their money, their clothes, their property? Because
He just told them to kill them, he didn't tell them to rob them.
their order was to kill the ones who planned to kill them. And it's a real credit in my mind to them that they didn't overextend that. Meanwhile, in the rest of the king's provinces, the Jews organized and defended themselves, freeing themselves from oppression. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but did not take any plunder. I love how they keep telling you that. The next day they took easy and celebrated much food and laughter. But in Susa, since the Jews had band together on both the 13th and 14th day, they made the 15th their holiday for laughing and feasting. This accounts for why Jews living out in the country and the rural villages remember the 14th day of Adar for celebration, their day for parties and exchange of gifts. After saving the kingdom, verse chapter 10, King Xerxes imposed taxes from one end of his empire to the other. The rest of it, King Xerxes' extensive accomplishments, along with a detailed account of the brilliance of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted. That's all written in the chronicles of the kings, Media, and Persia. Mordecai the Jew ranked second in command to Xerxes. He was popular among the Jews and greatly respected. He worked hard for the good of his people, and he cared for the peace and prosperity of his race. So Mordecai ended up being what? Second in command to the king. And respected and consulted. When I was reading it this week, I thought, supposedly the Nazis read a lot of the Bible. I wonder if they ever read this book. I wonder if it made them mad. Probably it did. So next week, we're going to spend 2 weeks looking at the life of Moses. We're not going to read it all, but I'll give you a sheet on Sunday for some of the high points to look at. And then it'll be almost time for Revelation after that. If you come up with other ideas, other things you want to study, write them down, I'll add them to the list. So think about this tonight, and think about how the Jews were treated then and how they were treated 75 years ago. Any last minute prayer requests? Loving God, thank you for this story, this book, that tells us how important it is to keep our priorities straight. How important it is to be willing to obey you. How important it is to be focused on what you ask us to do. Be with us as we continue this week. Bring us back together again on Sunday. In your name we pray. Amen.